He accidentally discovered that the most rebellious underachiever in the class was actually a once-in-a-century musical genius. He had casually left a piece of sheet music on his desk, but when he returned to the classroom that evening, he was stunned to find that the student everyone considered the worst in the school had learned the entire song in just one afternoon. He couldn't understand how a teenager could possess such extraordinary talent. Yet, when he tried to teach the boy how to sing, the boy responded with obvious resistance. His name was Mathieu, and he had worked as a supervisor at a boarding school for troubled boys. On his very first day, the previous teacher warned him about one student in particular. Watch out for a boy named Morhange. At the time, Mathieu had no idea why he had been given that warning. But the moment he stepped into the classroom, he quickly found out what these troubled kids were capable of. They had stuck a cigarette into the mouth of a mannequin just to provoke the new teacher. Instead of getting angry, Mathieu handled the prank with humor and diffused the situation. A trap set by the students sent him stumbling forward. The class erupted with laughter. Only when the principal walked in did the room suddenly fall silent. Everyone waited for Mathieu to snitch, but Mathieu chose not to expose them. For the first time, someone hadn't handed them over to authority. The boys were stunned. For the first time, something besides fear and rebellion appeared in their eyes: curiosity. Wanting to understand them better, Mathieu asked each student to write down their name, age, and dream. Almost everyone did, except for the youngest boy, Pepino. When Mathieu first met him, the boy had been standing alone by the school gate, staring endlessly down the road. Mathieu asked what he was doing. "I'm waiting for Saturday," Pepino replied, "because that's when my dad comes to take me home." But everyone at the school knew the truth. His parents had died during the war years ago. That promise of Saturday was all he had left to hold on to. His greatest dream was simple. He wished every day could be Saturday. These boys weren't born bad. They had simply been abandoned by the world. Rebellion and violence had become the only armor they knew. The very next day, he discovered that someone had stolen his briefcase. He didn't need to guess who was responsible. Before long, Mathieu found them in the restroom. The boys were gathered around his sheet music, studying it as if it were some kind of secret code. Another teacher happened to witness the scene. When questioned, Mathieu once again chose to protect the boys. He claimed that he had simply forgotten the briefcase there himself. But his kindness only encouraged them to push things even further. That night, mocking songs echoed from the dormitory next door. The boys expected an angry outburst. Instead, Mathieu calmly corrected their pronunciation. That night, Mathieu couldn't sleep. He had once dreamed of becoming a successful musician. After failing to make it, he had ended up taking this job as a school supervisor. But the off-key singing of the boys unexpectedly reignited a passion he thought had died long ago. Suddenly, he had a bold idea. Maybe music could become the key to unlocking these boys' hearts. Maybe these children weren't hopeless after all. Maybe they simply needed someone to see them. The very next day, Mathieu began testing their singing abilities. He planned to form a choir and give every student a role. Corbin, who couldn't carry a tune to save his life, was assigned to hold the sheet music. Even Pepino, who could barely speak clearly, became the assistant choir manager. Only Morhange was missing. After drawing a humiliating caricature of the principal during class, he had been placed in solitary detention for a week. While he was serving his punishment, Morhange's mother came to visit. Seeing the disappointment on her face when she couldn't find her son, Mathieu told another lie. He concealed the detention and claimed that Morhange had gone to see a doctor because of a toothache. He couldn't bear to make an already struggling single mother suffer even more. To officially establish the choir, Mathieu approached the principal. He presented his idea and asked for approval. The principal thought it sounded ridiculous. Still, he agreed, mostly because he wanted to watch it fail. Although Morhange was released from detention, he was assigned a month of cleaning duties. One day, he heard singing coming from a classroom. He stood outside the door for a long time, listening. He desperately wanted to join. But his pride and rebellious nature wouldn't allow him to admit it. Only after everyone had left did he sneak into the classroom and quietly begin singing by himself. Mathieu invited him to join the choir, but despite his love for music, Morhange refused. What Mathieu didn't know was that the boy often practiced singing alone in secret. While walking back to the dormitory, Mathieu heard a beautiful voice drifting through the air. Following the sound, he discovered Morhange singing alone. The boy's voice was bright, clear, and astonishing. Mathieu was completely stunned by his talent. He invited him once more and promised to give him a solo performance. Perhaps moved by Mathieu's sincerity, Morhange finally accepted. From that day on, Mathieu began giving him private lessons. He taught him proper pronunciation and breath control. Under Mathieu's guidance, Morhange's abilities improved dramatically. Soon, the boys' singing filled the halls of the school. For the first time, laughter replaced silence. Even the cold-hearted principal seemed affected by the atmosphere. Mathieu's arrival had brought changes no one could have imagined. Then one day, a new student named Mondaine arrived. He had severe violent tendencies and was considered extremely dangerous. Although Mathieu tried to include him in the choir, Mondaine remained hostile. Things got even worse when 200,000 francs suddenly disappeared from the principal's office. The principal immediately accused Mondaine of stealing the money. Inside the office, the principal falsely claimed that Mondaine had confessed and had him sent to prison. As he was taken away, Mondaine looked back at Mathieu. In that look were resentment, anger, and a trace of disappointment. With the money gone, the principal canceled the choir, but Mathieu refused to give up. He moved rehearsals into the basement and continued training the boys in secret. One day, Morhange spotted his mother happily talking with Mathieu. A strange wave of jealousy and anger suddenly rose inside him. Moments later, a bottle of ink came crashing down onto Mathieu's head. To teach him a lesson, Mathieu publicly removed Morhange's solo during choir practice. Humiliated and furious, Morhange stormed away. Just then, the principal arrived with unexpected news. The Countess, one of the school's major benefactors, had heard about the choir. She planned to attend a performance the following week. If the performance succeeded, the principal's long-awaited promotion would finally be secured. He ordered Mathieu to make sure everything went perfectly. Soon, the day of the performance arrived. The boys stood neatly on stage. Only Morhange remained alone in the corner. The Countess asked whether he was being punished. Mathieu simply smiled and said that he was an exception. The choir began to sing. Their voices were beautiful and moving. Everyone in the audience was captivated. Mathieu turned around and extended his hand toward Morhange. Taking a deep breath, the boy stepped forward. Then he sang. His heavenly voice instantly captured every heart in the room. The entire hall fell silent. Only his clear, soaring voice remained. The performance was a tremendous success. While the principal was away receiving an award, Mathieu decided to give the boys a day off and take them into the forest. The principal had barely begun celebrating when devastating news arrived. The school was engulfed in flames. As despair consumed him, Mathieu suddenly emerged from the forest with every student safe and sound. Not far from the burning building stood a familiar figure. It was Mondaine. The boy who had been falsely accused and imprisoned watched the fire with satisfaction. With a single act, he had taken revenge on the cruel world that had abandoned him. The principal's dreams of promotion burned away with the school. Consumed by rage, he blamed Mathieu for everything. Accusing him of abandoning his post, he fired him on the spot. He ordered Mathieu to leave immediately and forbade him from saying goodbye to any of the children. This time, Mathieu finally spoke his mind. He called the principal a cruel man who cared only about promotions and never about the children themselves. Then he packed his belongings and walked away from the school in silence. But as he reached the corner of the building, countless paper airplanes began floating from the classroom windows. Each one carried messages of love, gratitude, and farewell from the boys. At that moment, every disappointment and hardship disappeared. Mathieu realized that the seeds he had planted had already begun to grow. Just as he was about to leave, a small voice called out to him. It was Pépinot. The boy asked if Mathieu could take him away. Mathieu gently refused. He had no right to take any child with him. But then, as the bus engine started, he suddenly remembered something. It was Saturday. Perhaps in Pépinot's heart, Mathieu had long since become the father he had been waiting for. After countless Saturdays spent hoping, the little boy had finally found someone who came to take him home. Years later, Morhange became a world-renowned conductor. He devoted his life to honoring the man who had changed his destiny. Sometimes the thing that pulled us out of the darkness was nothing more than an unexpected act of kindness. Mathieu wasn't a hero, he wasn't a savior. He was just a failed musician and an ordinary school supervisor. But he was willing to bend down and wipe the dust from forgotten pearls. True education was never about punishment or fear. It was always about love, respect, and belief. May we all meet a teacher like Mathieu when we lose our way. And may we all become a light in someone else's darkest moment.